I married James the summer Ethan turned 16. The wedding was simple, rushed even, more a formality than a celebration. James wasn't one for emotion. He loved with duty, not warmth. From the start, I felt more like a partner in a business arrangement than a wife. Ethan didn't say much during that time. He watched everything though, always from just a step away, never interfering, never too close. The first few weeks after moving into their house, I spent most of my time rearranging rooms that didn't need rearranging, cooking meals that sat too long on the table. James had long work hours and longer silences. He praised me for keeping the house neat, for handling things, but he never reached for my hand, never asked how I felt adjusting to a life already built without me in it. Ethan was the only one who noticed. I remember standing at the sink one night, washing dishes long after dinner was done. I didn't hear him come in, but suddenly he was there, placing a glass beside me quietly. I jumped. He didn't smile, just said, "Didn't mean to scare you." Then, after a pause, "You looked somewhere else in your head." That line stayed with me for days. Because he was right. I was somewhere else always, somewhere I mattered more, somewhere I wasn't a guest in my own home. There was a coldness in the house that no heater could fix. James would go days barely speaking to either of us, and Ethan, strangely, began filling in those spaces subtly. He'd make extra tea and leave a cup on the counter for me. He'd pause Netflix if I walked in and ask if I wanted to watch something with him. Harmless things, nothing anyone could call out loud, but I felt the pull, soft and strange, like standing too close to a fire you didn't intend to start. One evening, a heavy rain knocked out the power. James wasn't home. I lit candles, walking carefully through the quiet house. In the hallway, I nearly bumped into Ethan. He held up a lighter wordlessly and helped me light the one I carried. We stood close in the flickering light, shadows dancing across the walls like ghosts. He looked at me not the way a boy looks at his stepmother, but the way someone looks at a person they've spent a long time trying to understand. "You shouldn't have to do everything alone," he said. His voice wasn't deep, but it held weight. I nodded, barely, but couldn't find words. He didn't move to touch me. He just stood there for a second longer than he should have, then turned and disappeared into the dark. I stood still, holding the candle, feeling the heat of it rise to my face, but it wasn't the flame that made me warm. Something had shifted that night, quietly, permanently. After that night, after the candlelight and the silence that hummed between us, I began to notice the smaller things more. The way Ethan's footsteps grew familiar, how his voice softened. Only when he spoke to me, he started appearing in places he usually didn't, leaning on the kitchen doorframe while I cooked, sitting at the edge of the couch when I read in the evenings, his presence quiet but lingering, like a song you couldn't stop hearing. James was gone more often now, client dinners, late meetings, out-of-town seminars. I stopped asking when he'd be home. He stopped noticing if I did. I wore makeup again, not because James cared, but because Ethan complimented my earrings once. I didn't expect it, just a quiet "those look nice" as he brushed past me to grab a glass of water. My heart reacted like it had been waiting years for such a small kindness. One evening, I came home from the store, soaked from an unexpected downpour. My hair clung to my face, and my blouse stuck to my skin. I was dripping by the time I stepped inside. Ethan appeared from the hallway, looked at me, really looked, and without hesitation, handed me a towel. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His eyes held something I wasn't ready to name, and yet something in me leaned toward it like a plant seeking sun. The weight of his gaze began to follow me. I'd catch him looking when he thought I wasn't. He never turned away quickly. He held it steady, intense, full of questions he never asked out loud. I didn't scold him. I didn't ask him to stop. Maybe because I didn't want him to. When James went away for a 3-day conference, the house shifted into something softer, quieter. On the second evening, I found Ethan on the porch swing, his long legs stretched out, a blanket over his lap. The sky was burnt orange, the wind gentle. I brought him a mug of tea without asking and sat beside him. He didn't speak for a while. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You ever feel like this house is full of strangers pretending to care?" I froze. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. We both looked straight ahead. "I know that feeling," I answered. "More than I want to." There was no need for more. That moment was more intimate than any physical touch. A shared ache, a truth exposed. Later, in the kitchen, our hands brushed when we reached for the same bowl. Neither of us pulled away. The moment stretched, long and aching. His fingers grazed mine barely, but deliberately. My breath caught. My heart made a sound only I could hear. He said my name for the first time, not "hey," not "you," but my full name. Slow, intentional, it felt like being seen. Not as a mother figure, not as someone married to his father, just me. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found the record player buried under old quilts and boxes in the attic. I hadn't been up there in years, but something drew me to it. Maybe boredom, maybe the need to be anywhere but in the silence of the living room. I carried it down gently, wiped off the dust, and prayed it still worked. When the crackling hum of the speaker came to life, I felt a little jolt in my chest. I picked a Nina Simone record from the worn sleeve and set the needle down. The room filled with her voice, slow and smoky, like a memory folding itself into the walls. I didn't realize Ethan had come downstairs until I turned around and saw him leaning against the doorway, barefoot, arms crossed, watching me. "I've never heard anything like that," he said quietly. "It reminds me I'm still a woman." I replied before I even realized the words had left my mouth. My voice caught in the air between us. He didn't flinch. He just stepped forward slowly, as if unsure of the rules but willing to break them anyway. "Dance with me?" he asked, not with a smirk or a boyish grin, but with a kind of fragile boldness that made my stomach tighten. I stared at him for a second too long. Then I nodded. He took my hand, and we moved into the soft space of the living room. No lights on, just the dull, late sunlight slipping in through the curtains. His palm was warm, hesitant at first. He placed his other hand lightly on my waist, barely touching. I rested mine against his shoulder, trying not to tremble. We didn't speak. The only sound was the low hum of Nina's voice and the distant tick of the clock on the wall. The rhythm was slow, swaying. Our feet barely moved. My chest brushed his every few seconds, and each time it did, he looked at me with something unsure, something almost pleading. His thumb gently brushed the back of my hand. It wasn't accidental. I didn't pull away. I don't know how long we stood like that. Minutes, maybe more. Time seemed to shrink down into the space between our bodies. My heart was thudding in my ears. I knew the line. I knew the roles. I knew what could be destroyed. But I also knew what it felt like to be touched gently. To be wanted, not out of obligation, but because someone saw you fully. He looked down at me and whispered, "You don't have to pretend with me." My breath hitched. The record skipped slightly. My fingers curled just a little tighter around his. I could have stepped back. I should have stepped back, but I didn't.